So, nowadays, most people want to either be a YouTuber, streamer, or that. But even with basic phones now, being able to record 4K, your PC or laptop might be showing its age a little bit when you try and actually edit that 4K video. Plus, who doesn't like more FPS in their games? So, let's break Lenovo's hearts and turn this ThinkStation into a jank station. If you want to build your own jank station or its equivalent, the first thing you will have to do is start with eBay. I personally was looking for HP Z440s and ThinkStation P500s. This is due to both of them using the LGA 2011 3 socket, which has support for Xeons and DDR4 memory. They're also smaller, cheaper, and overall more practical than their dual CPU counterparts. Although, if one CPU isn't enough for me, if you're doing like 3D animation, CAD work, I don't know, there is always the P700 and Z640 if you want to throw two CPUs in there and get up to 44 cores, 88 threads with the E5 2699 V4 Xeon. I personally ended up with a ThinkStation P500, which I got for about $180. The P500 is completely toolless and looks honestly pretty cool in my opinion. Mine, personally, came with 16GB of DDR4 RAM, a 240GB SSD, and a Xeon E5 1620V3. And it also has some serious I/O on the front. Full-size SD card reader, 4 USB 3 ports, and a headphone jack, plus, Jesus, that's a lot of USB ports. I will say though, unfortunately, the SD card reader is a little bit slow, but whatever. Okay, so now that we have our base system picked out, it's upgrade time. Depending on the price of your base workstation and what you're looking to do with it, what you spend your money on is going to depend on a lot. Whatever you do, you will probably need to upgrade your power supply though to upgrade this system. Unfortunately, you cannot get a regular off-the-shelf power supply. You will need a specific ThinkStation power supply. There is a 650 watt power supply, which is actually cheaper than a normal like off-the-shelf power supply for some reason, and it's even 80 plus platinum. That's cool. Mine came with a 490 watt standard power supply. I personally upgraded mine to the 650 watt power supply, which I got for $34. For my build that just has a CPU and GPU with moderate power draws, the 650 watt power supply will be fine. Also, the 850 watt is just really friggin' expensive. In terms of CPU, if you want this to be more of a gaming build, you are going to want something with fewer cores and higher clock speeds. Something like the E5 1650 V3, which is a 6-core, 12-thread, 3.6 GHz unlocked Xeon. And if your goal is total max performance, you'll want to look at the 18-core 2699 V3. And if you want a mix of both and want to spend a little bit less money, you can go with what I decided to get. The Xeon 2697 V3. A 14-core, 28-thread, 2.6 GHz powerhouse of a CPU. And I got mine for $35 with free 4-day shipping, which ended up being free 8-day shipping because the seller took 4 days to ship my CPU, which is just 14 cores for $35. It's ridiculous. And I'm also not sure why, but the P500 supposedly doesn't support Broadwell as per Lenovo, but the P510, which does support Broadwell CPUs, uses the same chipset and socket, so I don't know how that works. Someone could tell me in the comments, please let me know. Now for the fun part, the GPU. Putting a GPU in some of these workstations can be somewhat of a pain. Lenovo showed us they hate gamers by not adding in features completely unrelated to the purpose of these professional workstations, just so that we could add RTX 6960s 10 years down the line. And what I mean by that paraphrased word vomit I've seen online is this PC comes standard with only one 6-pin PCIe power cable, which is really only good for like a GTX 1060, maybe a 1660 Ti, which means it's time to do my favorite thing. Get creative and create fire hazards. If you want something with a little bit more oomph, you're going to have to get some janky as hell SATA to 6+2 PCIe power cables to plug into your GPU. These literally go from your SATA to your PCIe cables, which I cannot verify if these are safe or not. So if you are going to do this, proceed at your own risk. And if anyone watching this has experience with these, please let me know and I will pin your comment, depending on how good you are at faking being knowledgeable, and bonus points if you are actually knowledgeable about this. So Depending on your config and what you want to do with your GPU, you have a few options here. If you want to run an accelerator card, you can always throw a low power Quadro in here with a Tesla card like this one for some great 3D rendering performance, or I don't know, AI upscaling. I don't know. I'm a gamer. Or if you want to set up less stupid, you can get something like a GTX 1080 Ti or an RTX 2070. I personally went for an RTX 2070 because the R9 390 I had initially planned for this video was so severely bottlenecked in every game I played, I felt somewhat bad and bought a $250 GPU I didn't need just to not feel bad. I also rewrote almost half the script and had to redo all of my testing right before I was going to do my voiceover. But on the bright side, the RTX 2070 I got was an RTX 2070 Super, so hey. Also, yes, my R9 390 is janky. That's just because it was in my server and I didn't want to buy a fan shroud just for this. Whatever. Now, you may be thinking, you're using the 6+8 pen connectors like you told us not to do. Yeah, and you're not minding your own business, alright? Now, if this sounds like too much work, I am working on getting a $500 gaming laptop and seeing how good it performs compared to this jank station, so just make sure you subscribe for that. Okay, so building it. Overall, building the system was mostly easy, especially since it was all just toolless. The CPU was pretty easy to change out, standard LGA 2011 V3 mount. Mine came with a 240GB SSD, but I decided to put a PCIe M.2 adapter I had instead so I could store all my games and video files that I needed for testing easier. Then I just took out my old power supply, which was really easy. It just pulled right out and slid the new one in. Doesn't even require power cables to be run. And installed my shiny new 4-year-old mid-tier card. Since the ThinkStation was designed to be completely toolless, everything slotted in really easily, and even upgrading the power supply, it literally took like 30 seconds, tops. Now, all that's needed is my fancy fire starting adapters, which hook up to the 2 SATA power cables, then go into the 8-pin PCIe slot, and we are off to the races. As a side note, I did try using my GTX 1080 Ti with 2 8-pin power connectors using the SATA cables, and it would just crash, and I had to reset the CMOS to actually get it to come back on, so I don't suggest that at all. So, let's try some gaming. Pretty much most older games are going to run fine, obviously. So BioShock Infinite, Metro Last Light, even Fallout 4 ran at a pretty steady 60 FPS in the city on ultra settings. And surprisingly, most games were using a decent amount of cores as well. And all the games so far were just bottlenecked by the GPU, leaving a ton of headroom for recording or streaming. Or if you just want some 4K video as background noise because you get scared easily of being alone at night again, playing games instead of being out. Anyways, even emulators, which are usually single or double-threaded, ran great. I could even run 6 instances of Mario Sunshine while recording with OBS with just 30% CPU usage. And PCSX2 ran well, obviously. As for more modern games, well, the story is still the same. Master Chief Collection runs beautifully. Halo 2, Halo Reach, Halo 3, I don't know. It's Halo. Even Halo Infinite ran pretty well, getting about 80 to 100 FPS on high settings in big team battle. This is also the first time I've played Halo Infinite, and hopefully the last. Wow, I'm not good at Halo anymore. Metro Exodus runs at a solid 90 or so FPS, 1080p high settings with ray tracing in the intro area. And if you're wondering why I'm always in the intro area, it's because my saves keep corrupting. So, yeah. Also, recording using regular H.264, OBS was able to record 60 FPS 1080p video without affecting the frame rate at all due to all these cores and all the headroom they give me. So if you're looking for a budget streaming PC, this will easily handle it. Plus, if you're able to find a new graphics card that doesn't require 2 8-pin PCIe connectors, you should be able to actually keep upgrading it for a while without bottlenecking the CPU. As long as you don't play lots of games that are single-threaded, which, I mean, most of the games I tested seem to use at least 8 of the 14 cores, if not all of them. And I've also heard you can disable hyperthreading to get slightly better performance for single-threaded applications, but I'm just so GPU bottlenecked with my RTX 2070 Super, I don't really see a point in that, and I also just don't really know how well that would work. Overall, I clearly need more modern games to test. Please tell me in the comments what you would like to see tested. And honestly, the system is just so GPU limited, but I guess that's sort of the point because this is supposed to be a workstation / streaming PC. In terms of actually practical stuff, Blender BMW finished in less than a minute and Premiere ran beautifully. Even in a 4K timeline without proxies, it was able to run really well. There wasn't much delay, dropped frames, or even issues grading footage. It also exported my full 5D Classic view with animations in about 5 minutes in 4K. That's about half the time it took my main PC with a Ryzen 7 1800X and GTX 1080 Ti. If you're planning on using this PC for video editing rather than gaming though, I would honestly probably get a cheaper GPU, like a RTX 2060, GTX 1080, or even a GTX 1070, and take that extra money and try and get at least 32 gigabytes of RAM, since just Premiere alone was taking almost the full 16 gigabytes of memory alone. Getting more storage would also be a really good idea since, oh, and I forgot to mention this. This comes with 4 toolless hard drive bays, which is really cool. So if you want to skimp on the GPU, you could get 2 new 4 terabyte hard drives for 8 terabytes of raw storage for $120. Then later down the line, you can bump that up to 16 terabytes easily with 2 more. Or if you want to go down my route, 2 used 6 terabyte drives if you're into that, for 12 terabytes of raw storage that you could bump up to 24. It just really heavily depends on your budget, and unlike the $100 gaming PC I made recently, you have tons of options for anything that you may want to do to this guy. And lastly, I also ran Cinebench R23, and that did a really solid 11,146, getting actually somewhat in the neighborhood of the Threadripper 1950X. Which, don't even get me started on how expensive motherboards are for that system. I wanted to make a video on that. So, overall, I am really impressed with what you can build with $500 and some faith in your local fire department. Now, I just need to figure out where that Windows logo in the corner of my screen went.